Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Module 1, Public Relations, a Management Function. I'm Joan D'Amico. I'm also an APR, and I'm delighted to be with you here on this first step in your journey. So whether this is your first online cohort or your fourth online cohort, you learn at your own pace, and we're so glad you're with us this evening. So why don't we jump right in, because we have a great lineup of speakers as well as facilitators. We also have Joy, another APR who's in the chat. I thank you, Joy, for joining us. Joy not only helped me earn my APR, but she's helped hundreds of others with her activity in the online chat. So we're glad to have all of you with us this evening. So let's go to think about what you learned in the readings. And if you didn't have an opportunity to go through the readings, don't worry. This is a at your pace learning. But think about public relations and put in the chat how you would explain public relations if you were in an elevator for 45 seconds with someone. Could you explain public relations to them in that 45-second elevator trip? Let's see what you have to say. And go ahead and enter it right in the chat. What is public relations? And we know from the readings it's a management function, but can you add a little bit more to that? Go ahead and type it right in the chat. There's no right or wrong answers. Well, there's right answers and close to answers, but let's see what you come up with. Yes, great one. Yes, it's managing relationships with publics and important publics on whom the organization's success and management or failure rests. Very good, mutually beneficial. Yes, excellent. This is great. Management and shaping the public image. Yep, absolutely. It's all those things couched in or overarched by the management function that it is. And this is one of the things that we'll discuss in a little bit more detail this evening. One of the things I wanted to make sure is that you are receiving the task sheet. So if you have not received the task sheet, go into the online to learn and let us know. Send us a message through that application, and we'll get you on there to make sure that you're receiving. This gives you all the information you need for each week. Now, we understand that every week you might not be able to get to the task sheet. Do as much as you can and just really catch up when you can. You're never behind because you can always learn at your own pace. So stick with it. And I promise if you stick with it, you're going to learn things that you will be able to apply on the job almost immediately. Another way to really enhance your learning is through online study groups. And one way to find an online study group or an APR who can mentor you is by going to LinkedIn and joining the LinkedIn APR prep group. Once you join that, you'll be able to introduce yourself and find other APR mentors or APR candidates who are willing to either have you join their study group or create your own study group. We like to think about earning your APR. This really is a marathon and not a sprint. And in that journey, the Online to Learn course, it offers you three different modes of learning. The first one is the independent study. So the task sheet that I mentioned earlier, that sheet's part of your independent study. It will suggest readings. It will also suggest supplemental books that you might find more information on. And it could also include your study buddy or study groups that you might belong to. So that's your independent study. Then the second leg of this three-legged stool that I like to think of as the APR journey is the online to learn coursework. So when you signed up for the course, were given access to the 10 different modules, and each of those modules has online activities that you can do that will help really reinforce your learning. And then thirdly is what we're doing here tonight. This is the online cohort. This is where we come together. We have candidate volunteers and APR facilitators to help to really just solidify some of that learning that you've already been doing through the independent study and reading, or what you might have done through your study group. And I'm thrilled to have with me two awesome APRs, Karen Brinones and Jason Meza. I'd like for you each, Karen, I'll start with you, just to introduce yourself and sort of give your words of advice or encouragement as our candidates start this journey. Karen, over to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Joan. So my journey started a couple of years ago, and it was kind of off and on, so don't feel like this is a one-shot deal. I started, and then I got sick, and I had a family member that got sick, and I had to take a little time off. But I had a really great mentor who said you need motivation to kind of get it done. And my motivation was my oldest daughter's wedding. And January of last year, 2024, I committed to getting it done before her wedding, which was the end of September. And having that motivation really helped me kind of complete the process. Along with the coursework that I did here and on my own, it was really that kind of support system that really got me over the finish line. And in June of last year, I actually earned my APR. So use it every day now. So
Good.
thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Jason, tell us a little bit about your journey and any words of advice that you might have for our candidates this evening. Jason?
Hi, Joy. Hello, Joan. Good evening, everybody. Yes, I am Jason Mesa, APR, here in San Antonio, Texas, immediate past president for the San Antonio PRSA chapter. I earned my APR in 2021, right in the bubble of the pandemic. As soon as it struck in February, I was already in the study mode. But this course truly it cemented what I was doing. Had I not done this course, I would not have passed APR. My boss of 30 plus years of PR practitioner experience failed the course twice.
Mhm.
She leaned on everything other than the RPI method. So this course will truly it did wonders for me. I use my APR every day. My wife will attest that I do a 10-step PR plan on everything from cooking to cleaning. It just it once it gets in your brain, you'll learn how to take the test. You'll learn how to absorb all the content and think like a test taker. And I think that's the course is just beautiful. So I'm happy to be here to offer whatever support we can.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you, Jason. And another word of advice, similar to what Jason said, sometimes as you're going through the course, you might feel overwhelmed, like I don't know this, or I didn't know the answer to those questions, or I'm struggling with the scenario-based questions. Don't worry. Myself, I got my APR. I was already 30 years into the practice before I actually studied and took the test and got my APR. So for me, I had to unlearn a lot of bad habits. And then it took me 8 months. And once that 8 months, the light bulb just went off. And I realized, okay, I have to think like an APR. I might not have made these same decisions on the job before I learned about APR. But now that I had the APR, it changed the way I perceived the practice and how I went about decision making. So stay with us. It takes time, but you will eventually get it. Don't feel overwhelmed. First thing you should have done, if you haven't already done this, is download the APR study guide. I think it's in the 6th edition at this point, but if you go on to prsa.org and in the accreditation section, download the APR study guide. Now, this isn't the only thing that you'll use to study with, but it is actually an excellent framework. We're going to suggest some other reading materials. And don't worry if you don't get any of these, writing them all down now. You don't have to do that because this recording will be made available to you tomorrow. They'll upload it, so you'll be able to download this and scroll through to the slide that has the information you might be looking for. Now, this is a bookshelf of recommended texts. You don't need to read all of them. You don't need to buy all of them. You can get them used. You can rent, borrow them, however you get them. Most folks say that Cutler's effective public relations and public relations strategies and tactics, those are two that helped. I know they helped me immensely. But you don't have to buy them all, but you might want to supplement what you're learning in the study guide with some of these recommended texts. And just as a note, this is really active learning. When you go to the courseware, that second leg in the tri-legged, the triple-legged stool, this active learning is what we're talking about in the courseware section of the online to learn. Once you go in there, we'll be tracking your learning. So we'll be able to see your progress and how you're making it through each of the different modules. It's a great way to supplement your learning. And I'm going to turn to, if you read these quotes from other APRs, but I'm going to turn to our panelists and ask, starting with you, Jason, Can you tell us a little bit about the test? Because in some of these quotes, it says that, the questions are difficult, and I don't want to scare our candidates, but what can you tell us about the test and how you approached it?
Sure. Two-time test taker myself. My second time taking the exam, I scored a 60, or the first time was 60 out of 62. So close. But I waited 40 days to retest. But I think many people go into a test, it's less of a vocabulary test and more of a situational application. And when you immerse yourself in the scenario, if you be in the question itself, you're already leading a team of PR practitioners or you're a professional in the field. If you lean into the question and use that highlighter tool, both times I took enough breaks. I don't know if you're going to be doing a proctored exam, but just don't fret too much on a question. Come back to it. I ended up with about 25 minutes to go back through flag questions. In most cases, I revised my answers. But after going through all the tests, you got more clarity, and I wound up changing answers, and it probably worked too. But there are handfuls of tough questions where there's so many different good answers that all seem plausible. So just remember that RPI is the ultimate lean on solution. And in the end, you can go back and, again, I mentioned the highlighter tool, but just don't fret, go with your gut. I mean, really, truly, but don't overstudy. Do review your keynotes. Again, you can retake the test, but I think if you have to go through multiple cohorts or go back to a previous recording, do that, because you might miss a flag question, or there might be something you might come back to and revisit. But overall, take your time. It's one of those things where it's like an executive MBA program where you're taking like an MBA program in a shortened segment. But just lean on mentors too, like we all do.
Absolutely. And Karen, could you describe how you studied? Were there books from the bookshelf that we had on the slide we showed earlier? Were there any books that you particularly liked to help?
Well, I liked Cutlet and Centers also. That provided me with a lot of background. The study guide is essential because the test is built around the study guide, but really to fill in those gaps, I needed something else. And then for my own job, having it was one of the ones on uh, research and kind of understanding that kind of research, public relations research, the primer of public, thank you. Couldn't think of the name of it all of a sudden. Because my copy looks a little different. But that really provided me with the foundation to understand that R in RPI. And I agree with Jason, it's really about kind of slowing down and understanding the pieces and reading the question and understanding what the questions are asking. And that was a skill I also had to practice. Some of us haven't been in school for a few years, maybe 30 or more years, and to go back and take a class and to study on their own and to take that test, that was also something I had to practice. So give yourself a little grace and really practice the scenario questions that we're going to be going through. Are a really good way to practice answering questions. They may or may not be just like a question on the exam, but just that practice itself really gave me a lot of confidence.
Good. And speaking of scenario practice questions, we're going to go through at least two this evening, and Susan and Gwendolyn are going to read their questions for us. But I echo what Karen says, that the real secret to mastering the test and being confident going into the test is understanding how to write and respond to these scenario-based questions. Each one will test one KSA. Listen to the scenario. It'll be a 3 to 5 sentence prompt, and then there'll be a list of answers which follow. And typically on the test, you'll choose 2 out of 5 answers, and they all seem correct. So you really have to know the material. You can't memorize the material, and a lot of it is process driven. So you might have to know, like, what's the next step in a crisis communication program? All of a sudden you show up at work and the building's burning down. What's the next step? Things like that. So you really have to understand the processes as well. And then your response should be based on best practices. So even though some of those might seem plausible, what is the best practice that would be the best answer for that particular question? So I'm going to go ahead and ask Susan, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and reading your scenario-based questions. And once she's finished reading, she'll present all the answers. And let's wait until all the answers are presented before you put your answers in the chat. Susan, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So you are the PR manager at a transit agency that is about to open a light rail extension in an underserved community. While the project brings many economic and accessibility benefits, an extremely vocal and negative advocacy group is sharing misinformation about the project via social channels, which in turn is being picked up by the media. How should you respond? Please choose 2 of the 5 options.
Okay, so let's read all 4 before you choose your answers. Let's have Susan read all 4 potential answers, or 5. Go ahead, Susan.
5. So we have A, conduct a presser to address the inaccurate information. B, send talking points to the city council member and schedule media interviews. C, host another round of community open houses. D, create an FAQ document. E, postpone the opening celebration.
Okay, so class, everybody pick 2 potential responses. Which are the best 2 responses? And go ahead and put your 2 answers in the chat. And we'll go through. Okay, kind of a mixed bag. We've got A and B and C and D. Okay, a couple of A and Ds. Excellent. And this is exactly what you'll see on the, very similar to what you'll see on the course. Okay, I like that one. I don't hate A, but I think C and D. All right, let's see what the answer should be. Susan?
Okay, so the answers are C, host another round of community open houses, and D, create an FAQ document.
Okay, and the rationale for those answers.
So the sources for this response is APR Study Guide, page 89, and the KSA 6.5 on networks. This is an important project for the community, and developing relationships is also very important before, during, and after the opening. Conducting a press conference, A, when the negative faction is still very active, could place the agency on the defensive and appear desperate. Similarly, the elected official in B could be placed in a risky and vulnerable position when being interviewed by media. With C and D, you are proactively problem solving by going back out into the community with the opportunity to build additional trust and the opportunity to learn the facts and ask questions. This also supports relationship building and builds networks with the community and the media who may be skeptical. In E, this is a very important community project that is long overdue, and postponing it would create additional doubt and legitimacy.
Excellent. Well, great job, Susan. Thank you so much for presenting that. I'm going to turn to Karen now. At this point, can you tell us a little bit about Susan's question? What did you like about it? Was there an area that you could improve upon, something you would see on the exam? Karen?
Well, yeah, so I think the question fairly represents a type of question that you would see on the exam. It might be a little more specific than, down to kind of terminology that you might see in terms of your answers. It did very well reflect if there's more than one answer, you do, I think Joy put it in the chat, you do have to get both of them correct to get the answer, to get the question correct. But they're not tricking you. And this question didn't, it told you to select 2. So I think it's a fair question, and it's a good kind of way to practice. Definitely, not only taking the question, not only kind of answering the questions, but also in terms of writing questions. I think it was a great way to start.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to ask now Gwendolyn. There's a case study, excuse me, a scenario question that someone else had submitted. If you wouldn't mind reading that for us, please, Gwendolyn.
Sure thing. You are a senior public relations practitioner for a well-known public relations firm in Jackson, Mississippi. Planned Parenthood of Mississippi contacted you for crisis communications assistance. The recent Dobbs versus Jackson women's health organization that overruled Roe v. Wade has created intense public scrutiny for them, and immediate action is imperative. Which best describes your public relations role in this situation? Choose one.
Okay. Go ahead, read those for us, please, Gwendolyn.
Yes, so A, communication technician, B, communication facilitator, C, problem-solving facilitator, or D, expert prescriber.
Okay. So based on what you've read, which answer best describes that role? A lot of D's. Excellent. Yeah, I think it's pretty unanimous that D's the answer. Well, let's see what it should be. Gwendolyn?
Yes.
Go ahead.
D, expert prescriber.
Excellent. And if you wouldn't mind reading the rationale, please.
Absolutely. An expert prescriber dominates in rapidly changing environments, particularly in public relations firms specializing in crisis communication. Expert prescribers tend to work for organizations most threatened by public scrutiny. A problem-solving facilitator's dominant role is preferred when there is time for collaboration and joint problem-solving. Since immediate action is imperative, that was not the option in this scenario. Communication technicians and facilitators typically work as a promotional publicist for media and advertising agencies or educational and religious organizations and charities not in crisis.
Excellent. Well, thank you for reading that for us, Gwendolyn. And I'll turn to you, Jason, on this question. And if you could also address a question that someone mentioned about trick questions on the test, if you could address that as well.
Yeah, on this question, I definitely, I mean, that was anonymous. I was unanimous. It was an easy question. Expert prescriber definitely matches up, and the rationale meets up with that. Something that you would see on the test. I think, a lot of agency work involved. A lot of us have worked for agencies, agency owners. You understand the angle, the goals for the agency, but you also have to understand what can you guarantee this for the agency placements and stuff like that. So a lot of moving parts, but yes, based on the rationale and the KSA, you will see that. And bouncing back to, was it the previous question, Joan, or
Yeah,
another question?
I think someone in the chat was asking if you'll see like trick questions on the test.
Yes, and it's funny. There were two handfuls, both attempts of mine, of what seemed like just out of bounds questions, something I really did not study for. It met a KSA, but it just seemed like it just stood out a lot. And there are obviously test questions that they're bouncing, so proctored questions. So trying to figure out what those are might throw you into a little bit of a loop, but just again, answer the best you can. They're not tricking, but they are testing some future test questions submitted by UAB and other professionals. So there are some of those questions in there, maybe 4 or 5. I'm throwing that number out. Out of 132 questions, there will be a small handful of some that you will get that are just out of bounds, but they're still fitting. You didn't study for them a whole lot, but they're still there being kind of guided. So you will see those in the test. But as far as tricking you, no, there's no trickery. I've seen a question that says choose the best 4 out of 5 answers, and that was like, wow, this is going to be a tough one because they're all good. Eliminating one by process of elimination was hard for me. So I think that just, again, going through the test all the way through, marking some you don't really know about, come back, leaving time, and coming back to answer those might jog some memory, and those might be the test proctored questions that they're testing you with.
Yeah, and that's a great test strategy, is answer everything and then go back. Mark what you're not sure of, but answer it anyway in case you run out of time. Excellent test strategy. And also I'll note that there's no questions that are in the negative. Like everything is positive. What's the best answer? They won't say which one doesn't fit. It's always positive. So what's the next step in the process, what are the 2 best answers? So good strategies, and you'll get the hang of this. They're not easy to write these questions. I know I always struggled to write them myself. It took me like an hour and a half, but by the time you nail down what the KSA is, and then just create a question about that one KSA, they won't throw in a bunch of different KSAs, which stands for knowledge, skills, and abilities. It will only test one element. So keep that in mind. And really, when you learn to write them and answer them, it really increases your proficiency, and you'll go into that test with a lot more confidence. So I'm going to skim through the notes because we have two excellent presentations. So you can go back, as I mentioned, this will be recorded. So you can always go back to the module notes at another time. But one of the things to remember about public relations is really you're also working with your top management people. And the question that Gwendolyn just read was really about your management roles and responsibilities, staff and line. So that you'll see if you go to the APR study guide, a lot of this, the notes from this, some of this was taken from the study guide, pages 18 and 66, which talks about the different roles of public relations within the organization. There'll be a section, a whole module on PR as a management function that we'll cover at a later date. What are the expectations of management? You kind of have to look at all of these. You really have to know your organization, but you also have to know the different communications backgrounds of your folks. You know, what are some issues that could crop up? You have to be anticipatory in identifying what those, not everything that could go wrong, but those top three that could really tank your company or create an issue with your shareholders or publics. How about your C-suite, their capabilities, their credibility, and looking at your internal communications. So there's a lot of expectations of management. And what we try to emphasize in public relations and in this module is really about PR being a management function. And when you look at management, look at the different roles that you play as a PR practitioner. You're really a trusted counsel to executives within the organization. You could also be responsible for internal communications, media relations, community relations, depending upon how your organization is set up, whether it's a large organization that might have different managers for each of these types of communications, or whether that falls under one umbrella, or sometimes there's one practitioner that does a good portion of these by themselves. So there's a lot to consider and understand when you're looking at the role of public relations, as well as the role of public relations in decision making. These are some of the different roles that are involved with public relations in each organization. And a lot of it depends on your proximity and access to executives. Who's the dominant coalition? Who you should be part of that. That's the coalition that actually sets the tone and values of your company. That really should be part of your function as a public relations professional. And as I mentioned earlier, really anticipating what potential pitfalls could harm your company and then creating a plan around those. We're going to get an excellent taste of that with a presentation that Marcus put together on crisis communications. And also this really talks about who has the levels of influence in the decision-making process, and really understanding the other departments within the organization and how you as a PR practitioner can help them better communicate and help you manage those relationships between those key stakeholders within your organization. And then the internal department, the test will normally ask a little bit about the structure. You know, what is a line versus staff? You might want to understand those terms. And again, this type of information can be directly found in your APR study guide, as well as some of the off-the-shelf textbooks that we mentioned. And then really other structures for APR, that some use a hybrid of both internal public relations and maybe an external agency that manages a lot of the outside work or opportunities, getting opportunities for your executives or speaking engagements or trade shows, those types of things. So it just depends on the organization, its size, as well as its budget. And finally, you are trusted counsel for the executive team, as well as for the employees within your organization and even within the community. So really, these were some of the pages that were referenced in this particular section of notes. So if you want, go back to your study guide, check those pages, and you'll get a little bit more information on the study of public relations and how you might be able to take a look at your organization in a different way and perhaps where you sit and what your influence could be. Hopefully, it'll be even greater with your APR. So we have an excellent presentation by Nicole Kunchik. And Nicole, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself. And this exercise was part of the task sheet, and some of you may have submitted it in the Online to Learn courseware. And Nicole actually presented her, put together a presentation to share with you this evening. And I would emphasize to you, if you really want to expand your learning, a great way to do that is to participate, to volunteer in some of the online cohorts if you can. So Nicole, I'm going to turn this over to you. And you just tell me when you're ready for me to advance the slides. Nicole?
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, let's take a look at why PR deserves the C-suite office. And let's be honest here, PR really deserves the corner window office. Next slide, please. Where PR is effective, communication begins. An organization's success starts with informed leadership. A PR pro at the management table helps to grow and protect that success. PR works with management to make sure the organization takes appropriate steps to accomplish its mission. PR provides advice that sometimes can be hard to hear, but necessary so that management can make the best decisions. And PR gives leadership a better understanding of its overall business position, as well as a look at the potential threats and opportunities it faces. Then PR advises on the best way to navigate those challenges and opportunities. Next slide, please. What a PR executive contributes. First, an excellent PR pro helps an organization be successful, and success ultimately translates into profits and better reputation. PR facilitates two-way communication between an organization and its stakeholders or publics. So this is really key. PR promotes mutually beneficial relationships between the organization and its stakeholders. This helps leadership understand where expectations with stakeholders align and where they don't, so that the organization can develop appropriate plans and messaging. PR takes a proactive approach when it comes to problems. So while you should definitely have a crisis plan and always update it regularly, you should never have to use it if your PR team is doing the job correctly. PR also helps the organization understand where internal changes are necessary so that the organization can stay competitive and relevant with all of its stakeholders. And finally, it analyzes trends to identify those threats and opportunities to avoid early crises. Next slide, please. So PR is really your best advocate. It is also a double advocate. You may have heard it called spin, but excellent PR doesn't deal with half-truths. It also doesn't just solely deliver a message one way from the organization to its stakeholders. Instead, it's a mutually beneficial relationship that works both for the organization and its stakeholders to find the best messages and the ways to deliver them so they have the best chance of being heard. Then, PR provides feedback on if that messaging works so leadership can make better decisions. Next slide, please. So here's the bottom line. Trustworthy companies outperform their competition in the long run. Savvy leaders understand PR is the best way to grow and protect relationships and its reputations, because we all know that a damaged relationship can be difficult, if not impossible, to repair. PR will also serve as your organization's moral compass to foster decisions that align with your mission. Strong values equal a trustworthy company that is successful. And PR is really the key to making that happen. So make sure you hire a PR professional for your management team. And heck, it could even be me. Thank you. And those are my references.
Excellent. Very well done. I really appreciate that, Nicole. Great job, everyone. Let's give her a hand, a round of applause there in the chat if you can. That was great. So I'm going to turn to, we'll start with you, Karen. Comments, questions, or concerns about the notes, anything you would add?
I don't think there's anything I would add. I do see some chatter in the chat about trying to stay up with the the page numbers and but I think what Nicole did a really good job at was to kind of distill down the information that could be across a wide variety of resources. And it takes a little while to kind of get the hang of that. And Nicole, I think you did a really wonderful job at kind of highlighting the high level things that you should know. Definitely having that kind of understanding of the management function, it will serve you well on the test and also on your panel presentation. So I think you did a great job on that. So yeah, that's what I have to
Good.
say.
Jason, thank you, Karen. How about you, Jason? Anything to add to that?
Bravo. No, I agree that they get the corner suite, the corner office. Nicole, great
Support that.
presentation. I lean back on the executive MBA scenario where this course truly just puts you in a position to almost defend what we do and try to, lobby for what we do and to ingrain yourself in the community, in the organization. In the CBE, we call it the computer-based exam. In the CBE exam, there was a lot of defending your answers in a crisis situation with a lawyer, with legal speak, no comment, no comment. And so we have to be at the table too to offer why the rationale. Why would we put out a press release? Why would we come out and do, a press event? Why do we need to be involved? Do we need to say something? So all these tactics that she's laid out for us just spells a beautiful presentation of why we need to hire someone in this position and why they should stand on that expert prescriber level and less of the communication technician level. So awesome work. Thank you.
Excellent. Totally agree. And I would also like to add to that, there were some folks mentioned, and I think Karen touched on it, about page numbers and things that might be missing. A lot of times, and that's one of the advantages of coming to the online cohort course, is there might be some additional materials that might not have been in the task sheet, but they supplement what the learning is online. And again, keep in mind that there's a ton of material that you're trying to assimilate. So go easy on yourself. Take it task by task. You might not learn everything or know everything. You might have to review things that you might feel more strongly about, or have more proficiency in one module than in another, and that's totally fine, because each time you go through this or go to the online cohort, you'll learn something new. And again, it's usually something that you can apply on the job. So don't worry if you don't know everything or have all the answers, or I didn't get that page, or what was that? We always have these recordings available to you. And eventually, this behemoth of material is going to make sense to you. As I mentioned, you'll go through this course, maybe even the first cohort. None of this will make sense. I think I went through the first cohort with the deer in the headlights look like. What am I doing? I've been practicing for 30 years and none of this makes sense. And then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. So give yourself a lot of patience and grace. Next up, we have Marcus, who put together a very nice presentation on crisis response. Now, again, this might not have been part of your reading, but crisis or issues management, as we like to refer to it, is something very important, and it's becoming, unfortunately, issues management is something that we're faced with on a regular basis. So I'd like to call on you, Marcus, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself.
Hello.
Hi there.
Crisis response situation. I've done crisis response before, but never kind of like this. I tried to stick to the materials in the book and the study guide to sort of direct it. And I've spent all my time in government, so I tried to branch out and do something that was more corporate, where you have to talk to shareholders as not just stakeholders. So for-profit companies. So branching out a little bit. But the situation I came up with is you are the director of public relations for a large US-based multinational technology firm called TechHelp. Your organization spans multiple countries in North America, Europe, and Asia, with 10,000 employees, 8,000 in the US, working around the clock to provide your product to customers and technical support for your business technology products to customers around the globe. After a bad quarterly earnings report during a recent financial downturn, the CEO hired business consultants to determine a sustainable path forward for the corporation. Screenshots of the final report were leaked on X, and it made the recommendation to lay off all the American workforce and offshore their jobs to cheaper labor markets in other countries. The CEO and board made the final decision to accept all consultants' recommendations, but none of this was supposed to be public until the next stakeholder meeting at the end of the next quarter in 2 months. Employees are emailing HR concerned about their jobs. Customers are calling concerned about degraded support and ability to provide service in the future. And the media is talking about the viability of the corporation. As the decision had just been made, you and your team had only had a skeleton plan for the announcement in 2 months. And the resources I found most helpful for this were the crisis communication response sequence that you'll find in Chapter 7, which is sort of the outline that I followed. The Newsom and Haynes crisis planning presentation, which you'll find in Section 7 when we get to that. And strategies and tactics, Chapter 10 had a good part of their Chapter 10 on communicating with diverse audiences, which I incorporated into this as well. So first, using the Newsom and Haynes crisis planning presentation, we had to determine define the crisis. What type of crisis is this? Well, it's immediate crisis because it could have reputational or brand effects immediately on your corporation. And we're seeing that as people are calling in, your customers are calling about changing to another company. And it's an intentional crisis because someone intentionally did this to cause harm to your company or change your company's strategy or plans. There's little time for planning other than what little had been done in preparation for the official announcement. And you need to use a prepared crisis communications plan, which you should already have stocked away somewhere if you're reviewing those quarterly or annually, already approved by the COO or CEO or COO. I know that a lot of times CEOs don't really get involved in all of that. They leave it to someone else, whether it's a vice president or a COO, and they allow them to, sort of run through those types of plans and make them official on behalf of the company, so that you can use those to start initial responses that first acknowledge the situation, which is what you have to do immediately. Next slide. So the next step is to assemble the team. I left a lot out of this in assembling the team, but I wanted to hit the high points of you need to assemble your communications crisis response team and let them know that this is a crisis because it's going to could have permanent or damaging effects to the reputation, brand, or even to the entire corporation itself. That they should adhere to the crisis response plan that you already have in place. This will include issuing an initial statement acknowledging that you are aware of the situation and whatever messages you have in there. And the second part of this that I thought about as I was doing this, going to the corporate side, is having your customer service representatives with plan scripts inside the crisis response plan to respond to something like this. And then you need to be in the room. It's like in the last presentation, how important we are to the C-suite. You need to be in the room when they're coordinating the next steps with the CEO, COO, or the board. You need to be at least hear what they're thinking so that you can start working in that direction to sort of help get their message out about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Next slide. So adjust the plan. And some notes on this. So adjust the plan. So you'll find that, the crisis response plan is going to be very vague. It's what we call in the Army an op plan. It's, just a skeleton, a framework of a plan. There's really no meat to it. So you have to adjust the plan to fit the specific crisis. You probably weren't planning on someone leaking a sensitive document to X that could damage your entire corporation, and then the president maybe retweeting it or having something to say about it, or it getting involved at the national political level if you're going to be offshoring jobs in this sort of political environment. So that probably wasn't in your communications plan, and if it was, you've got a great mind. So you're thinking of all the paths that it could take. Distribute an initial statement that addresses the concerns of the employees and assures customers that to the media and the employees and the employee labor relations group. So if you have employee labor relations groups, or you have an employee that's sort of a de facto leader of the employee groups, and sometimes that will emerge in a crisis like this, developing a relationship with them and communicating with them what you're doing and why you're doing it. Next slide. Prepare spokespersons, identify a spokesperson. You need people who are credible and who have the authority to speak on behalf of the corporation. A lot of times they don't like to see, whether we like it or not, they don't like to see, even though we have all the talking points, we've got them all memorized, we've got all the messages and themes, and we've done all the work, they don't want to see us talking. So we need to find someone with the authority and the credibility, vice president, COO, deputy COO. I don't know who it is in the corporate world, but someone with authority and credibility that can speak about the actions you're taking, why you're taking them, and what your next steps are going to be. And in this event, talking to your employees and the employee labor relations groups, and explaining the thought process and how you're going to work through the next steps. And so then so you've created this, you've assembled your team, you've prepared these spokespersons, you've identified the spokesperson. So now you have to implement the plan that you're building an airplane in flight. So next slide, implement the plan. Based on the CEO board's final decision, there's a few tactics you could do. Create a website to assist employees with finding a new work in their career field, showing that, you care about the employees, you're making a hard business decision, and you don't want to see people suffer through it. Add frequently asked questions with responses, including timelines. Lay out the reasoning for your decisions, and whether the decision's good or bad, at least giving them the reason why you're doing this. And then something like setting up an employee hotline, just a phone hotline where the employees can call, what about my retirement? What about my benefits? What about, my 401, all that sort of stuff where they can have those questions answered. The next tactic I'd recommend in implementing your plan is making social media social. Hopefully you have some sort of software like Meltwater where you can see all the mentions and comments, and you can have draft comments available so that when employees start speaking or tagging you and stuff online, you can go directly to them from your official account and answer their questions, or deliver a message to them to help sort of alleviate some of the tension. Host employee town halls in person and digital. And media interviews, you're really going to be talking to the more external publics, providing information to your engaged publics, customers, and the people who have now become sort of stakeholders in your organization. If they, at the national political level, if they decide to get involved, speaking to them on why you're doing it. And next slide. And after the crisis subsides, it will subside over time. You need to evaluate the effectiveness of your plan. And a couple of points you want to hit is update the plan based on the PERSA Code of Ethics. And one of those main things that we have to look at is the CEOs and the executives are going to want to hold as much information as possible. The information's already out there. Now it's up to us to provide as much information as possible to our stakeholders or shareholders about what's going on and why we're doing it. And I thought the chapter 10 did a great job, and something I'm not really great at is making sure that we're hitting our diverse audiences. Do you have a large foreign-born audience that speaks English as a second language? Maybe they get their news from ethnic stations like Telemundo or something like that, and they don't really watch, CBS local. So maybe, did you effectively reach them by engaging with those audiences? And also, did you effectively reach the newer generations? The newer generations coming into your workforce. We have Gen Z and coming into the workforce now. Zoomers are coming into the workforce, and they aren't on traditional media. They aren't even on, I call myself a boomer millennial because I was born in 81. I'm like a zennial. So they aren't even on Facebook as much. They're on Instagram, TikTok. So was your plan and the channels and methods that you use effective in reaching all of your younger generations of audiences and your older generations of audience? And after that, after you go through your plan, you review it, you do the AAR, after action review, as we like to call it. Make those changes to your plan, and hopefully you're better prepared for the next event.
Excellent. Well, let's everybody give Marcus a big round of applause in the chat. That was very good, Marcus. Thank you for not only sharing the information, but also the references that you used, because that was one of the questions I had. A lot of it seems to have followed some of the different plans out there. And you mentioned that the APR study guide. Also, Joy mentioned in the chat, James Lukashevsky's, there's a handout, but James Lukashevsky also has a PR process. And I believe I have that written, it's pages 112 to 113 in your APR study guide that talks about crisis communications. And again, that is going to be a separate module that we'll be discussing in a future online cohort. So excellent job, Marcus. And now turn to you, Jason. Anything to add to that?
No, great job, Marcus. I applaud you for taking an off-the-shelf case as opposed to something that you're closer to. You've removed yourself from emotionally from a case and layered on RPI into it, tried to figure out how to implement a plan. I think it was a fabulous place to start. It was a great case, a great problem to have. It's a very common problem. And I think that many times we, as an APR, future APR, a lot of them here, you will have the chance to judge the AMBLE awards and other awards locally, and you get to see a lot of different case responses and panel presentations come through, and you get to kind of really figure out what the nuts and bolts are. And every time I always do a case response, I draw into 4 RPIE, RPI, and I live in those 4 scenarios. So if I'm building strategies and objective strategies, tactics, and the P, the planning session, I've got to come back to the E and say, did I evaluate? Did I measure those results that I laid out in P, and I'm evaluating them in E? Little things like that. I think the structure's there. It's just, molding it and fitting it to perfectly, present the case as is. But again, applause, because it's not easy. And we walk people off the ledge all the time saying, don't worry about the panel presentation. It was called the readiness review back in the day. Just wanted to make sure you were in line. It's the gateway to the CBE. And I think that's just one extra hurdle that you're just now there. And yeah, you'll get there, brother. You'll get there. And I applaud you. It's a great presentation. Good show.
Yeah, excellent job. Karen, how about you? Anything to add to Marcus's presentation?
No, I agree with Jason. I also applaud you, Marcus, for stepping outside your comfort zone. I live in the education world, and I had to pull things that were in the corporate or in the government world, and it really gets you to think about things differently. Kudos for you for that. It's not easy, especially when you don't understand the lingo. My husband will tell you he had to answer lots of questions, and so did our CBO at our school district, to help me understand that kind of corporate financial piece. Also like the fact that you followed the steps, and remember as part of this, you're following an ideal situation. In reality, we all know we might respond a little bit differently, but that structure is really important to have that firm understanding of that structure when you head into both the panel presentation and the computer-based examination. And I agree with Jason, you're on the right path. And next time I have a crisis, I'm going to reach out to you. Of course, we probably have one every day, but anyway.
Very good. Yes, those are excellent points from both Karen and Jason, because look at it this way. When you have the framework, it makes your job as a PR professional a little bit easier. And as Marcus mentioned in his presentation, and I think we mentioned it earlier tonight, is when you anticipate what could go wrong. And in some organizations, it's pick the top 3 to 5 potential things that could really tank your company. If you're a tech company, a major data breach could be a huge trust violation and be a big problem for you. So anticipate that and create a communications plan around that. And again, I would emphasize what the Lukashevsky information as well, because that gives you the whole steps to plan. And what I liked about what Marcus put in his presentation was employee communications. And when you look at Lukashevsky's plan, it really tells you that the media, they're the last people you communicate with. first as your employees, because they're your ambassadors. So I think it was a really great job. Well, we're just about coming to the top of the hour. And again, I just want to emphasize that we're so proud and pleased to be a part of your APR journey. And it truly is a journey, and you will get there. Give yourself patience, study based on your needs. We know life gets in the way, and you need to sometimes take a break or take a step back. And there's no shame in doing more than 1 or 2 of the online cohorts. I did 3, and it finally all sunk in. So I really encourage you to do the activities, set aside time each week, but make it reasonable. If you can't do 3 hours, then do 1 or 2 hours. Try at least one of the questions, one of the scenario-based questions. And if you do join a study group, one of the best ways to structure your study group is by creating scenario-based questions. I know a couple of the study groups I belong to, we created, we followed along with the online cohort, and we would, if we were on, module 3, communications theory, then we would each come that evening with a scenario-based question, and we would not only try to answer those questions, but also discuss, was the question in the right format? Did it test the right thing? Were we trying to make the question too broad? So I would encourage you to study that way. If you can, go on the LinkedIn site, check for the APR session that people are, the APR prep folks who might be interested in having you join their study group, or if you'd like to find an APR as your mentor, that's another great place. Again, these notes will be loaded online. You'll be able to go into the online to learn coursework module, and you'll be able to access these notes. So next week is module 2, applying ethics and law. Now, you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to understand or be a paralegal to understand, but there's some basic laws around copyrights, name, image, and likeness. If you're in the corporate communications world, communications around earnings, there's some rules, some SEC rules that you need to follow. So, and those will appear on the test. So next module is an important one as well. But again, if you can't join us Tuesday evening, you can always download the recording. If you can't do the readings, pick up on them another time. You can work at your own pace, and you'll really, once you get involved with this, the more you work with this material, the more manageable it becomes. And again, I want to thank Karen, Jason, our APRs, as well as Joy in the chat for your help, and any of the other APRs that I may have missed. Thank you. It really means a lot to me to have you monitoring that chat and answering the questions as we go along. And let's give a big round of applause again for our volunteers who presented this evening: Karen, Jason, Susan, Marcus, Nicole. Thank you again. And I will see you next week, or I will see you in 2 weeks. But again, study, look for the recording tomorrow, and look for that task sheet. If you don't receive the task sheet, go into the online to learn module and make sure you send us a message so that we get you in the spring cohort. All right, everyone, keep studying, stay with us. We appreciate it, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.